last remaining territory on the planet that could have such a designation is Antarctica.
Antarctica is often called the last frontier, a place that still holds the power to capture our imagination. For centuries, people looked at maps and filled the unknown with fear, writing warnings like, "Here be monsters." Today, the only place on Earth that still carries that mystery is Antarctica, a frozen world at the bottom of the globe where humans were never supposed to exist in the distant past. Yet this land of endless ice hides more than just snow and storms. Beneath its frozen surface, scientists have uncovered secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about human history. Among them, the most shocking of all, a discovery that no one was prepared for. Buried deep under the ice, researchers found human remains. Not the remains of modern explorers, sailors, or lost scientists, but bones that were far older, stranger, and far out of place. At first, the discovery was dismissed as a mistake. Maybe the dating was wrong, maybe the samples were misplaced. But the more they studied, the more unsettling it became. These remains were unlike any expected in Antarctica, and they pointed toward something terrifying. The last frontier of Earth may not be as untouched as we once believed. Antarctica, the land thought to be empty, may have carried human footsteps long before anyone thought it was possible. Monsters on old maps. For most of human history, the southernmost parts of the world were nothing but guesswork. Early explorers, with no way to see beyond their known seas, filled the edges of their maps with warnings and fears. Strange drawings of sea serpents, giant birds, and words like, "Here be monsters," marked the unknown. These maps were not just art, they were reflections of deep human anxiety about what lay beyond. To them, the bottom of the world was a place of danger, mystery, and death. The idea of a vast frozen land at the end of the earth became part myth, part legend, and no one believed it could hold life. But these warnings may not have been as far from truth as they seemed. Centuries later, when explorers finally reached Antarctica, they saw only an endless desert of ice, inhospitable and lifeless. Yet beneath that ice, discoveries began to surface. Fossils of forests, creatures long extinct, and even human remains in places no one was supposed to be. Those ancient mapmakers may have filled their parchment with monsters out of imagination, but their instinct to fear the unknown south was strangely fitting. For what modern science is uncovering in Antarctica may be even more unsettling than mythical beasts. It is the story of a human life that ended in a place no human was ever meant to reach. Bones beneath the ice. The turning point in this chilling mystery came with a discovery no one expected. Buried deep in the frozen soil of Antarctica, far from any known human path, were human remains. Not the scattered bones of a lost sailor or the frozen body of a stranded explorer, but something far older. A skull, weathered by time, yet unmistakably human, was found along the remote shores of Yamina beach. At first, scientists thought it must be a mistake, perhaps a misplaced sample, an error in dating, or even the remains of a modern castaway swept off course. But as more evidence surfaced, those explanations began to collapse. The bones were older than any previous human discovery in Antarctica. They did not match the timeline of modern expeditions, nor did they belong to anyone recorded in shipwrecks or lost missions. Even more unsettling, fragments of DNA pulled from the skull showed differences that could not be ignored. Markers that hinted at origins not entirely like our own. Surrounding the site were objects that only deepened the mystery: tools, symbols, and fragments of something bigger, things no one could easily explain. The remains were not only out of place, they were out of time, leaving scientists with a haunting question. What was a human doing in Antarctica centuries before the world even knew it existed? A find too strange. When Chilean biologist Daniel Torres Navarro first uncovered the skull on January 7, 1985, it seemed too strange to be real. He wasn't searching for ancient history. He was simply collecting marine debris along the lonely coast of Yamina beach. Yet there, half buried in the frozen sand, was a human cranium staring back at him. No gear, no clothing, no signs of a modern expedition. Just a skull, resting alone where no human should have ever been. Officials logged the find, but it gained little attention. To most researchers at the time, it was easier to explain it away. Maybe it was a lost sailor, maybe the remains had washed ashore, or perhaps it was even a mislabeled sample. For years, it sat quietly in archives, occasionally studied but never taken seriously. But something about it never fit. Why were there no other bones nearby? Why had it survived the brutal Antarctic elements in such condition? And why did carbon dating return results that defied expectations? Each test, each analysis only deepened the unease. What should have been dismissed as a simple anomaly slowly revealed itself as evidence of something much bigger. Something history books never prepared us for. This wasn't just a stray bone in the wrong place. It was a warning sign that Antarctica's past was far stranger than anyone dared believe. The skull at Yamina Beach, a remote stretch on Livingston Island off the Antarctic Peninsula, became the center of one of the greatest scientific mysteries of our time. It was here that Navarro's discovery shocked researchers. A human skull buried in the icy sand, staring silently across a land where no human was ever supposed to set foot. Unlike frozen explorers preserved in gear or shipwreck victims lost to storms, this skull had nothing to connect it to the modern world. No metal tools, no clothing fragments, no camp remains. Just bone, ancient and alone. For years it gathered dust in storage, a puzzle without a frame. But when modern scientists returned to study it, the results shook the world. Carbon dating placed the woman's death centuries before Antarctic exploration began. DNA showed she was not European, not a sailor, but a woman of South American origin, likely from the Mapuche people of Chile and Argentina. This revelation raised impossible questions. How had she crossed the deadly southern seas? Why was she the only one found? And why was her skull so well preserved in one of the harshest climates on Earth? Yamina Beach was supposed to be an empty, forgotten shore. Instead, it became proof that the human story in Antarctica was far older and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. A woman out of time. The more scientists studied the skull from Yamina Beach, the clearer it became. This was no ordinary discovery. The woman to whom the skull belonged lived and died centuries before any recorded human reached Antarctica. Carbon dating placed her remains long before the age of European exploration, a time when the frozen continent was believed to be unreachable. She was South American in origin, likely from the Mapuche people of Chile and Argentina, a culture known for resilience and skill in navigating rivers and coastal waters. Yet, there was no record of their people ever traveling thousands of kilometers across the savage Drake Passage into the heart of Antarctic storms. She was a woman out of time, her presence breaking every assumption about where ancient humans could go. Her DNA carried markers that linked her to Patagonia, but also showed rare anomalies not seen in most modern descendants. Even stranger, the state of preservation suggested she had not simply drifted there by chance. The bones seemed almost deliberately placed, as if her final rest had meaning. Who was she? An explorer, a castaway, or something more symbolic? Standing against centuries of human knowledge, she became a haunting reminder that the past is not as fixed as we once believed. First death in Antarctica. If the dating and DNA results are correct, the woman found on Yamina Beach holds a grim title. She may have been the first human to die in Antarctica. Long before explorers with steel ships, compasses, and insulated clothing braved the southern seas, her journey ended on a barren, frozen shore. Unlike modern expeditions, she had no protection from the deadly winds, no permanent shelter, and no recorded mission. Her presence stands as an impossible contradiction. How could a woman from South America, likely of Mapuche ancestry, cross thousands of kilometers of freezing ocean centuries ago? Scientists struggled to explain it. Some suggested she was carried by ocean currents. Others imagined a lost canoe pushed too far south, but neither fully explains why her skull lay partially buried, preserved against time. She wasn't supposed to be there, and yet she was. If she truly died on that coast, her death rewrites human history. She wasn't just a forgotten castaway. She was the first proof that humanity reached the white continent long before it entered our maps. Her lonely skull is more than a relic. It is a silent witness to a death that defied the limits of her age and to a journey no one thought was possible. Questions with no answers, the discovery of the Yamina beach skull left scientists with more questions than answers. How could a South American woman have reached Antarctica centuries before ships capable of surviving the journey even existed? Why was she alone, with no other remains, no tools, and no trace of a settlement or wreckage nearby? Even more puzzling, the preservation of the skull seemed unnatural. Exposed to brutal Antarctic winds and salt air, it should have decayed rapidly, yet it remained remarkably intact. Was she buried intentionally? Did others travel with her, their traces lost to ice and time? Or was she left there for a reason, a deliberate act that carried spiritual or cultural meaning? Each possibility is unsettling. If she drifted across oceans, her survival seems impossible. If she was part of an expedition, where is the rest of it? And if she was sent there intentionally, then what was she meant to find or protect? Every new test only deepened the enigma, widening the gap between what science could measure and what human history had recorded. The Yamina skull was not just a puzzle of bones and dates. It was a direct challenge to our understanding of where humans went, what they achieved, and what secrets the frozen continent still hides. Impossible Journey South, the woman's presence in Antarctica forces us to confront an impossible journey. The Southern Ocean is one of the most hostile stretches of water on Earth, even for modern ships built from steel. Waves as high as mountains, freezing winds, and powerful circumpolar currents make the Drake Passage a nightmare to cross. And yet, centuries ago, without compasses, maps, or thermal clothing, someone made it, or was carried, to the icy edge of the world. The Mapuche and Yagan peoples of Patagonia were skilled at navigating rivers and coastal waters, using canoes made from bark and seal skins for warmth. But there is no record of them attempting voyages so far south. Still, the skull proves that somehow, against all odds, the journey happened. Was it a group blown off course by storms, a ritual voyage toward a land of mystery, or a forgotten expedition that never returned? Each possibility pushes the limits of what we believe ancient humans could achieve. The odds of survival were almost zero, yet she reached Antarctica, and her death left the only trace of a journey once thought impossible. Her skull is evidence that humanity's boundaries were crossed far earlier than history admits. 3 theories of arrival to explain the presence of the woman's skull in Antarctica. Scientists developed 3 main theories. The first is ocean drift, that her body was swept out to sea from South America and carried by powerful circumpolar currents until reaching Livingston Island. But this theory struggles to explain why the skull was partially buried in the sand and so well preserved after centuries of exposure. The second is accidental exploration. Some believe a small group of indigenous seafarers, like the Yagan or Mapuche, could have ventured farther south than expected. Using bark canoes and seal skins, they may have been blown off course during storms, only to meet their end in the unforgiving south. Yet this explanation leaves questions. Why no other remains, and why such preservation? The third, and most unsettling, is intentional travel. What if early South American civilizations, or even an unknown culture, knew about Antarctica and deliberately sailed there? Ancient maps spoke of Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, long before Europeans saw it. Could she have been part of a forgotten journey, a ritual mission, or even a settlement attempt? None of the theories fit perfectly, But together they reveal one truth: her presence was no accident. Someone somehow reached Antarctica long before history admits. Ocean drift mystery. The simplest explanation for the skull at Yamina beach is ocean drift. Some researchers argue that the woman's body may have been carried by the powerful Antarctic circumpolar current, the endless river of water that circles the Southern Ocean. In theory, a body could have been swept southward, preserved by freezing temperatures, and eventually washed ashore on Livingston Island. But this idea quickly falls apart under scrutiny. The skull was not found lying exposed. It was partially buried in sand, suggesting it had been there for centuries, not recently deposited by the sea. No other human remains, clothing, or wreckage were found nearby. The preservation also raised doubts. If her body had simply drifted for weeks or months, it would have been broken apart by waves, salt water, and scavengers. Instead, the cranium remained intact, weathered but strangely resilient. Scientists noted that the Antarctic elements are too harsh for remains to survive in such condition unless protected or intentionally placed. Ocean drift may seem logical, but the details argue otherwise. The woman's presence on that beach points to something more deliberate, something that defies the randomness of the sea. The drift theory, once a comfort, only deepens the unsettling mystery. Lost explorers at sea. The second theory imagines the woman as part of a doomed expedition. Centuries ago, the Yámana and Mapuche peoples of southern Chile and Argentina were skilled seafarers. They built canoes from bark, hunted with harpoons, and wore seal skins for warmth in some of the harshest climates on Earth. It is possible that a small group of these early navigators ventured farther south than anyone thought possible, blown off course by storms or chasing new hunting grounds. The Drake Passage, with its brutal winds and massive waves, could have carried them to the icy shores of Antarctica. If true, the woman might have been one of the earliest explorers to set foot on the continent, long before Europeans ever mapped it. Yet, no other bones, shelters, or tools were found near Yamina beach, raising questions about whether she was truly part of a larger group. Could she have been the last survivor of an expedition that never returned? Or perhaps chosen for a spiritual journey into the unknown, sent to a place considered sacred and unreachable? The idea of lost explorers at sea is haunting because it suggests courage and tragedy. A forgotten voyage, ending in silence, marked only by one woman's skull. Signs of intentional travel. The third theory is the most unsettling of all: intentional travel. What if the woman at Yámana beach did not arrive by accident, but as part of a deliberate journey? Some historians point to old European maps that marked Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, centuries before Antarctica was officially discovered. Could ancient South American civilizations, or even an unknown seafaring culture, have known it was there? Her Mapuche ancestry hints at a people skilled in navigating rivers and coasts. But this was no ordinary voyage. If she and others set out with purpose, the questions become darker. Were they seeking new lands, following myths of a white land beyond the sea? Or perhaps carrying out a ritual, a mission that demanded reaching the edge of the world? Some researchers note that the beach's name, Yamina, is also tied to indigenous groups of Tierra del Fuego, suggesting a deeper cultural link. The skull's condition and placement, partially buried, preserved, and alone, suggest more than chance. It feels deliberate, as if someone placed her there, or as if her death marked something sacred. If her journey was intentional, it was not just exploration. It was an act of meaning, one that history has buried beneath the ice. Clues under the ice. The woman's skull was only the beginning. As scientists revisited the Yamina beach site and surrounding areas, they began uncovering more signs that something unusual had happened there long ago. Geological surveys revealed strange anomalies beneath the ice. Patterns that didn't match natural formations. Some looked like walls or enclosures buried deep under frozen layers, while others showed magnetic disturbances, often linked to metals or human activity. Even more disturbing, heat maps revealed geothermal activity beneath the Antarctic peninsula, creating pockets of warmth that could have made small areas temporarily livable centuries ago. These clues suggest that Antarctica was not always the barren, lifeless place we see today. During brief climate shifts, combined with geothermal heat, the coastlines may have been seasonally accessible. This raises a terrifying possibility. Could humans have not only reached Antarctica, but actually lived there, even for a short time? The anomalies point to something bigger than a single woman's death. Hints of activity, presence, or even structures buried far below, whether remnants of a lost culture, natural formations mistaken for design, or something entirely different. The clues under the ice suggest that Antarctica still hides secrets waiting to be uncovered. The question is, should we keep digging? Secrets of ancient warmth. Antarctica has not always been a frozen wasteland. Scientists now know that during certain periods, including the medieval warm period nearly 1,000 years ago, global temperatures rose enough to briefly thaw parts of the southern continent. Combined with geothermal activity beneath the Antarctic peninsula, these warm intervals may have created small pockets of habitable land along the coastlines. Yamina Beach, where the skull was discovered, sits near one such zone. Volcanic vents, fault lines, and trapped warm waters beneath permafrost could have formed temporary oases, fleeting windows where life could survive. If early South American seafarers stumbled upon such a place, they might have found it survivable, if only for a short time. This changes everything. It means Antarctica wasn't always locked away behind walls of ice. Instead, there were moments in history when the frozen frontier briefly opened, inviting the bold, or the desperate, to cross into its silence. The woman on Yamina Beach may not have been a castaway at all. She might have stepped onto land that appeared alive, with warmth, resources, and promise, only for that fragile haven to vanish beneath, returning cold. The secrets of ancient warmth remind us that Antarctica's story is not static. It shifts with time, hiding entire chapters under the ice. Strange shapes beneath snow. As researchers expanded their studies beyond Yamina Beach, technology revealed disturbing signs hidden under the ice. Satellite scans and ground-penetrating radar detected odd formations, shapes too regular to be explained as natural. Some appeared circular, others like long, straight lines resembling walls or enclosures. Scientists hesitated to call them structures, but the patterns stood out sharply against the chaotic randomness of natural geology. Alongside these shapes came magnetic anomalies, signals that usually point to buried metals or tools, raising further suspicion that humans, or something, had once left a mark here. Reports whispered of artifacts, shaped stones unlike Antarctic geology, fragments that didn't match local rock. While no official confirmation has been released, the rumors suggest discoveries far stranger than a lone skull. If real, these hidden shapes hint at a forgotten presence. Perhaps settlements, perhaps ritual sites, now sealed beneath centuries of snow and ice. What unsettled scientists most was that several planned expeditions to investigate were mysteriously delayed or redirected. Access to the site has since been tightly restricted, leaving the world with only shadows of the truth. Were these just tricks of geology, or evidence of a chapter in human history deliberately buried? Beneath Antarctica's snow, the shapes keep their silence. Whispers of hidden artifacts beyond the skull itself. Quiet reports began to circulate of other discoveries near Yamina Beach, objects that didn't belong in the frozen south. An anonymous researcher leaked claims that shaped stone fragments had been found, pieces that matched no known Antarctic geology. Others whispered of tools, carved symbols, and even metallic traces buried under the sand, quickly removed before they could be cataloged. None of these supposed artifacts were ever officially published, but the stories persisted, fueling suspicion that more was uncovered than the public was told. Some expeditions that planned to revisit the site were suddenly delayed or redirected, and eventually the area was placed under strict restrictions, accessible only to approved teams under heavy oversight. To many, this secrecy was more revealing than the finds themselves. If ordinary stones or debris had been discovered, why hide them? What was so dangerous or important about the artifacts that they could not be revealed? For some, these whispers suggest a suppressed history, a deliberate effort to keep Antarctica's past buried. Were the objects signs of a forgotten human journey or evidence of something far stranger? The skull was undeniable, but the artifacts remain only in rumors. Fragments of a truth the ice refuses to give up. Antarctica, once alive? To understand the mystery of the Yamina beach skull, scientists turned to the deeper history of Antarctica itself. Long before it became a frozen wasteland, this continent was alive. Millions of years ago, Antarctica was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, covered in forests, rivers, and teeming with life. Fossilized trees, pollen, and even the remains of dinosaurs and marine reptiles have been found beneath its ice, proof that the land once thrived with ecosystems far different from today. More recently, during the last 6,000 to 8,000 years, parts of the coast may have remained ice-free, offering rare windows where humans could have set foot. Even as late as the medieval warm period, about 1,000 years ago, shifting climates may have thawed parts of the Antarctic peninsula, creating brief ages along the coastlines. This means the woman discovered at Yamina Beach might not have arrived at a land of eternal ice, but one that, for a short time, opened itself to survival. Combined with geothermal heat and favorable currents, early seafarers may have stumbled upon a world that seemed both alien and alive. Antarctica's story is not just of cold and death. It is of a land that once breathed, and perhaps briefly welcomed human presence. DNA that shocked science. The true breakthrough came when scientists finally analyzed the woman's DNA with modern technology. For years, her skull sat in storage, dismissed as an anomaly. But when advanced sequencing tools were applied, the results stunned researchers. She was not European, nor the victim of a modern expedition gone wrong. Her genetic profile linked her to South American indigenous groups, particularly the Mapuche and Yagan peoples of Patagonia, civilizations known for enduring harsh climates and navigating unforgiving seas. Yet her DNA also carried rare markers, strands not commonly found in modern descendants. Some sequences seemed older, suggesting a branch of humanity that had vanished or remained isolated. Stranger still, subtle mutations appeared in her mitochondrial DNA,